What if the web your life runs on simply stopped? On some days, a single message, a mistyped command, or 1,000 hacked cameras can make huge chunks of the internet go dark, for millions of people in minutes. Today we'll rewind through the anatomy of web collapse, how the internet actually breaks, 3 real events that showed how fragile our digital life is, and what we learned, and didn't learn, after the lights came back on. By the end you'll see why the internet stopping is rarely mysterious, and almost always avoidable. Before we talk about how it fails, we have to be honest about what the internet is. Most people picture it as one giant thing, but it's actually a system of interconnected layers. Physical cables, yes, there are real wires, data centers and servers, routing systems that say how to get there, and services like DNS that translate names into addresses. Think of it like postal mail. Undersea cables are highways, routers are sorting centers. DNS is a directory that tells your letter which house number to go to. If any major part fails, huge chunks of traffic can't be delivered, but the failure mode depends on what breaks. There are a few classic causes for big outages: power failures and physical damage, earthquakes, storms, grid blackouts that take down local networks and data centers. Human error, one mistyped command or a bad configuration can cascade through a system. Software bugs, updates or bugs that trigger cascading failures. Routing mistakes, BGP flubs can make whole networks invisible. Distributed denial of service or DDoS, armies of devices flood targets until they drown. Targeted attacks or sabotage, when infrastructure is deliberately attacked. We'll use 3 major, real incidents to show how each of these actually plays out. Power doesn't just keep the lights on. It keeps ISPs, cellular towers, and many data centers alive. When a major electrical grid fails, routing tables and internet exchanges inside the affected area can go silent. That was visible in the North America blackout of 2003. Millions of people lost power, and parts of the internet in the affected region effectively disappeared from global routes for the outage period. Networks don't fail all at once. Some regions lose power and their routers stop advertising routes. That makes them unreachable, not because a submarine cable was cut, but because the routers that say, "I'm here," are offline. Recovery is often about power restoration and re-advertising routes. Next, the incident everyone talks about is proof that a single human can still topple cloud powerhouses, an employee using the wrong command, and a big chunk of the modern web stopped answering. In large cloud services, a maintenance operation can touch hundreds or thousands of servers. If an operator runs the wrong command on a control plane or mistargets an automation tool, they can cause healthy nodes to be taken down or routing to fail. That's exactly what happened in a major cloud provider outage that disrupted many downstream services, from payment apps to collaboration tools. The company's post-mortem later showed that a routine debugging step unintentionally removed capacity in a critical region, and because many services were tightly coupled to that region, the failures cascaded. The takeaways were boring, but crucial. Runbooks must account for human fallibility, simple safeguards need to stop dangerous bulk operations, and critical control planes should be isolated or multi-region by default. And then there is the problem of weaponized scale. Imagine millions of little devices, security cameras, home routers, all infected and ordered to scream at the same address. The flood doesn't look like humans visiting a site, it's just noise. But if the target is something central, like the directory service that all your favorite sites rely on, the noise can make the whole internet feel dead. In one of the most widely studied incidents, a botnet made from poorly secured IoT devices hammered a DNS provider. Because that provider sat between users and many popular websites, the attack didn't just hit one company. It made Twitter, streaming services, and e-commerce platforms intermittently unreachable for large swaths of users. The botnet itself used default passwords on cameras and routers to conscript them into malicious use. a powerful reminder that tiny, cheap devices can cause enormous problems. What made this worse was the architecture. Many companies centralize critical services with a few providers for cost and simplicity. When that central point struggles, many dependent services do as well. The security world calls this the single point of failure problem, and it's a design smell we still wrestle with. Let's break down how a large outage typically unfolds, step by step. First, there's a trigger event. It could be a storm, a typo, a bug, or even an attack. Next, a local failure happens. Maybe a router, a data center, or a service goes offline. Then, you get this cascading effect. Dependent services try to retry, which can congest network links or exhaust failover capacity. There's also a visibility gap. Status pages might fail or be delayed, and customers just see 500 errors or broken apps. After that, mitigation kicks in. Teams work to identify the root cause, apply fixes, reroute traffic, and recover. Finally, there's a post-mortem. Organizations analyze what went wrong and hopefully publish fixes so it doesn't happen again. Notice, there's nothing mystical here. Most outages are just combinations of ordinary things, multiplied by scale. When the internet goes dark, it's not just about missing out on memes. Businesses can't take payments, emergency communications can be disrupted, and tens of millions of people may lose access to services. For example, large regional blackouts have been estimated to cost billions in lost economic activity, and major cloud outages can cost public companies tens to hundreds of millions in market impact and lost productivity. But beyond the money, there's also a trust cost. Repeated outages make people question whether the cloud is reliable, and they push regulators and companies to demand higher standards. Because outages are inevitable, the smarter approach is resilience. Design systems to fail gracefully. Key tactics include redundancy, like multiple data centers, multiple DNS providers, and multiple undersea routes. There's also the idea of using diverse providers, so you're not putting all your critical services behind one vendor. Rate limiting and edge filtering can help blunt DDoS attacks before they reach core services. Chaos engineering, that's purposely breaking things in controlled ways to reveal weaknesses. Immutable runbooks and guardrails help prevent human error escalations. And of course, observability and rapid rollback, so teams can spot problems and rewind updates quickly. Actually, some of these practices only became mainstream because of the incidents we just covered. For example, cloud providers added stricter safeguards for control plane commands after manual errors caused large outages, and a lot of companies diversified DNS and CDN providers after DDoS attacks exposed the risk of relying on a single provider. Even with better engineering, there are trends that keep risk high. The explosion of Internet of Things devices with poor security, growing geopolitical targeting of infrastructure, highly centralized cloud ecosystems, and the economic pressure to optimize away rarely used redundancy. In short, we've learned how to reduce risk, but incentives don't always line up with safety. That's why policy, regulation, and consumer practices, like changing default passwords, are as important as good engineering. Let's imagine a DNS provider fails globally for, say, 2 hours. Users might open apps and see cannot connect. Some companies with multi-DNS setups would be fine. Others would be effectively invisible until caches expire. Payment systems might stall, and customer support calls would probably surge. The net effect: confusion, economic friction, and a big PR headache. But we've built ways to avoid total catastrophe. DNS caching, multiple authoritative servers, and CDN edge caches mean that in many cases, basic content remains accessible even if part of the system stumbles, provided companies have prepared for it. Three quick practical lessons. For individuals, change default passwords on internet devices, enable automatic updates where safe, and have fallback communication plans. For businesses, invest in multi-region architectures, diversify critical third-party providers, and practice chaos engineering. for society push for minimum security standards in consumer devices and transparency from service providers when outages happen. So, did the internet stop in these events? Not in the sci-fi sense, but the user experience, what people see and can do, absolutely stopped for millions. Often the cause is not magic, it's scale multiplied by one of the failures we covered. Power, people, software, routes, or malicious armies of devices. The good news, every major failure teaches us something, and those lessons are the reason the internet works far more often than it doesn't. If you want, next week we'll take one incident and rebuild it step by step, with animations showing exactly how packets fail and how engineers reroute traffic in real time. Hit subscribe, drop a question in the comments. What outage do you want explained down to the packet level? And if you found this useful, share with someone who still says the internet is magic.